There's a difference between conservatism, radicalism, and fascism. This is fascism.
Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump.
Well, that was quick. After a year plus of calling out Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, Morning Joe hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough met with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend and discussed their interaction, their meeting on air this morning. So I'm going to play this clip for you, and then I'm going to get to the obvious reason why they did this. The reason that they are not going to admit on air, but I'm going to tell you why they met with Donald Trump. First, here is the clip.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
All right, let me first get the obvious out of the way. This is a show that once said it's not a reach to compare Trump to Hitler. If you don't see it, you're just stupid and you're one of them. And then they go and meet with Hitler. Now, I don't disagree with the philosophy of speaking to people that don't agree with you. I definitely agree with the example that Mika Brzezinski used in trying to use diplomacy with world leaders as opposed to just outright, getting into a military conflict. So I agree with that philosophy. The difference here is that Morning Joe is not a world leader. They are the press. The press's job is to speak truth to power, is to tell the audience what is really going on. If they want to be insiders, if they want to try and be these people that find common ground, which I think is incredibly naive if they're actually honest about that with Donald Trump. But if that's what they want to do, they don't need to have their show. They can give their show away to somebody else who's actually going to maintain reality and speak truth to power. Let's be clear, though. This is not a show that has ever really done that. Yes, they've been critical of Trump. How could you not be? But in terms of the powers that they represent corporate interests. They represent the wealthy. Sometimes those interests intersect with, the common people, like when it comes to issues of democracy. But oftentimes it doesn't. And this is the show that spent years at this point attacking the left, attacking Bernie Sanders, attacking progressives. They're the ones that helped to elevate Donald Trump in 2015 when he was an unserious primary candidate. You can't. Free media is invaluable to a primary campaign. So they were part of the issue when it came to the ability for Trump to find an audience after he launched his campaign and just seemed like a clown. They kept him on TV again and kept bringing him on, kept raising his profile. So these aren't the people to now entrust with this idea that they're the ones that are going to help to steer Trump in the right direction. But again, if they want to be those people, then don't be in the press. It's that simple. Now, I want to share just a clip of what they were saying about Donald Trump. This is a year ago, but this goes to what they have been consistently saying about Trump up until this point. And I'll be curious to see if this sort of commentary continues after this meeting.
I just want to go through again this New York Times article, and let's just go through them. Because it's time that fascism is called fascism, and Americans know exactly what they're voting for. And, you know, I've heard people poo-poo this and go, oh, people on the far left. No, I'm a conservative. I'm on the right. There's a difference between conservatism, radicalism, and fascism. This is fascism. This is the Times quotes an expert on the topic. Fascism is generally understood, and this is boilerplate stuff, really, for what fascism is. Fascism is generally understood as an authoritarian, far-right system of government in which hyper-nationalism is a central component. Check. It also features a cult of personality around a strongman leader. Check. The justification of violence or retribution against opponents. Check. And the repeated denigration of the rule of law. Check, said Peter Hayes, a historian who has studied the rise of fascism. Past fascist leaders appealed to a sense of victimhood to justify their actions. Check. We're entitled because we've been robbed. We've been victimized. We've been cheated and robbed. Check, check, check. The whining, the snowflakery coming from the Trump people. I mean, a snowflake falls on their shoulders and they're victimized. They're victimized by history books on Hank Aaron. They're victimized by kids' books on Roberto Clemente. They're victimized by tweets. They're victimized. You name it. They are victimized by everything. They are such weak snowflakes, and they're using that victimization to justify violence against their opponents.
So that video is from November 21st, 2023, and this goes to the reason, I forgot to mention this earlier, the reason why they met with Trump. They are afraid of being targeted. That's it. They live very comfortable lives. They're very wealthy. They've seen what Trump has been saying about his enemies, about the press, and they simply don't want to be in the crosshairs. Now, again, if they want to try, if they are honest about, which I questioned, but if they are honest about trying to, find common ground with Trump, and I guess the attempt there is to try to steer him in a direction that is less overtly authoritarian. If they are honest about that, they can't be in the job that they're in. That is not the job of the press. So let's see if they leave their show. I highly doubt that. I also highly doubt that they're going to continue on this sort of commentary, this sort of language used against Donald Trump if they are indeed meeting with him and speaking with him on a consistent basis. Again, showing that this was never a show that you should watch for any sort of barometer of where things are, at least for most people. But it does give you a window into how the elites think. And they're going to continue on that. So if that's what you're interested in, sure, I guess, Morning Joe's the show for you. But this is not the responsibility of the press. They should give this show up to somebody that actually cares about democracy, cares about the issues, and is going to be honest with you about the Trump administration.